My name is Margaret, and I have lived in the same house in Clarksville, Tennessee for 31 years. I raised my son, Daniel, in that house. I planted the rose bushes along the front walk, painted the kitchen yellow twice, and buried my husband, Ray, in the spring of last year. I thought the hardest thing I would ever do was learn how to sleep on my side of the bed again after 40 years of sharing it. I was wrong. This story starts on a Tuesday in October, about 14 months after Ray passed. Daniel called me in the morning, which was unusual. He normally texted. When I saw his name on my phone, my first thought was that something was wrong with the baby. "Mom," he said, "Kayla and I have been talking. We want you to come stay with us for a while, just through the holidays, maybe longer, since Dad." He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't have to. "I want you to understand something about my son. Daniel was always a good boy. Quiet, thoughtful, the kind of child who brought home stray cats and wrote thank you notes without being asked. He married Kayla 3 years ago. She is pretty and organized and keeps a very clean house. I always told myself that the distance I felt from her was just the natural awkwardness between a mother-in-law and daughter-in-law. I told myself that for 3 years. I was still telling myself that when I packed my suitcase and drove 40 minutes to their home in Franklin. Their house is newer than mine. Everything in it matches. The throw pillows match the curtains match the rugs, and the rugs match something I can't quite name, but that makes the whole place feel like a photograph rather than a home. They had a guest room ready for me, with a candle on the nightstand and fresh towels folded into points like a hotel. It was very thoughtful. It was very Kayla. My granddaughter, Sophie, was 8 months old. She had Ray's nose and Daniel's ears and absolutely nothing of Kayla's that I could identify, which secretly delighted me. She was a good baby, slept reasonably well, ate without fussing, laughed at things that weren't particularly funny, the way babies do. I loved her immediately and completely in the way you only can when you've already done the hard work of raising a child and can enjoy a grandchild without the terror. The first 2 weeks were fine. I cooked dinner most nights. I took Sophie on walks in the stroller so Kayla could rest. Daniel was working long hours at the engineering firm. He'd been promoted 6 months before, and the new role demanded a lot of him. Most evenings, it was just Kayla and me and Sophie, and Kayla was polite and grateful and somehow always a little distant. I noticed small things, the way she angled her laptop screen away when I walked into the kitchen, the way certain conversations stopped when I entered a room, not obviously, not rudely, but they stopped. Phone calls she took in the bedroom with the door closed. I told myself I was a grieving 63-year-old woman who had recently lost her husband and was now living in someone else's house, and that I was projecting. I told myself that several times. The first night I heard it, Sophie was already asleep. It was a Wednesday, just after 11. I'd gone to bed early with a book and hadn't made it past 3 pages. I was lying there in the dark when I heard Kayla's voice in the hallway, hushed but animated, the way people talk when they're trying to be quiet but can't quite contain the energy of whatever they're saying. I couldn't make out words. I heard her go into the home office, the one Daniel used when he worked remotely, and the door clicked shut. I didn't think much of it. People make phone calls at night. I went to sleep, but it happened again Thursday and Friday and the following Monday, always after Daniel was in bed, always in the office, always that same quality of voice, low and quick and somehow pressurized, like something being said that needed to be said fast before someone heard. I started paying attention to other things. There was a filing cabinet in the office, a gray 2-drawer one that had come from our house, Ray's old one actually, which I'd given to Daniel when we cleared out the study. Daniel kept financial records in it, tax returns, the deed to the house, insurance documents. I knew because I'd helped him organize it when they first moved in. One afternoon in November, I came home from grocery shopping earlier than expected. Kayla's car was in the driveway. When I came through the side door into the kitchen, I heard the office door close. Not slam, just close. The quiet, deliberate close of someone who heard a car door and made a decision. Kayla appeared in the kitchen 30 seconds later. She was wearing her usual weekend clothes and her hair was pulled back and there was nothing visibly unusual about her. except that her right hand was holding her phone in that tight, knuckle-white way people hold phones when they've just done something on them and are hoping you didn't notice. "You're back early," she said. "They had no line," I said. She smiled and helped me put away the groceries, and I watched her hands the whole time. I want to be honest with you. I did not want to believe what I was beginning to think. This was my son's wife. This was the mother of my granddaughter. This was the woman Daniel had chosen, and my son had good judgment, and I had made my peace with her distance because some people are just private, and not every daughter-in-law is going to feel like a daughter, and that is simply the way of the world. But I had been married to a man for 40 years who trusted people easily and got hurt by it twice in ways that cost us real money and real time. And in 40 years of marriage, I had learned to pay attention to the thing that didn't fit. And Kayla, in that kitchen, holding that phone, smiling that smile, something didn't fit. I called my friend Patricia that evening from the backyard with the door shut. Patricia has known me since 1987. She is direct in the way that only lifelong friends can be direct without it being cruel. I told her what I'd noticed: the calls, the office, the filing cabinet, the phone in the kitchen. I told her I felt like I was going crazy. "You're not crazy," she said, "but you need to know for sure before you do anything. Because if you're right, you need evidence. And if you're wrong, you need to know that too." She was right. She is almost always right, which is both her best quality and her most irritating one. I ordered 2 small cameras online the next morning. They arrived in 2 days in plain brown packaging, which I brought inside before Kayla had a chance to see the mail. They looked like smoke detectors, small and white and utterly unremarkable. I put one in the office, positioned on the bookshelf behind a row of Daniel's old engineering textbooks, angled toward the filing cabinet and the desk. I put the second one in the hallway outside the office, positioned on the hall table between a framed photo of Daniel's college graduation and a small clay pot Sophie had theoretically made at a baby art class. I felt terrible doing it. I want you to know that. I stood in that office with the camera in my hand, and I thought about what kind of person installs a hidden camera in her son's home. And I thought the answer was a person who is afraid, and a person who has learned that fear sometimes knows things that trust doesn't. I drove to Patricia's that afternoon and we set up the monitoring app on my phone together because Patricia's nephew works in IT and she has absorbed more technology knowledge than she admits. I did not have to wait long. Friday night, Daniel fell asleep on the couch watching football at 9:30. I covered him with the blanket from the armchair and went to bed. I set my phone on the nightstand with the volume on. At 11:14, I heard the office door open on the camera feed. I lay very still in the dark and watched my phone screen. Kayla sat down at the desk. She didn't turn on the overhead light, only the small desk lamp, and in its narrow yellow glow, I could see her clearly. She opened the bottom drawer of the filing cabinet, Ray's old filing cabinet in my son's house, and she took out a folder. She set it on the desk and opened it, and then she angled her phone over the pages and began to photograph them, one by one, slowly and carefully, making sure each page was flat and fully lit before she moved to the next. I counted 11 photographs. Then she put everything back, exactly as she'd found it, closed the drawer, turned off the lamp, and left. I stayed awake for a long time after that. In the morning, I waited until Daniel had left for work, and Kayla had taken Sophie to her music class, a 45-minute window I had learned to rely on, and I went into the office and opened that bottom drawer myself. The folder she had photographed was labeled in Daniel's handwriting, Estate, Dad. It contained Ray's will, the deed to our house in Clarksville, documentation of Ray's life insurance policy, and a letter from the attorney who had handled Ray's estate outlining the distribution of assets. According to Ray's will, our house and the majority of his assets passed to me with a portion set aside for Daniel in a trust that would mature in 3 years. I sat on the floor of that office for a while with that folder in my lap. Then I called the attorney, Gerald Hoffman, who had handled Ray's estate and who I had known for 20 years. I told him what I had seen on the camera. I told him what was in the folder. He was quiet for a moment and then he asked me to come in. I drove to Gerald's office on a Tuesday with the camera footage on my phone, and I sat across from him at his large oak desk and I showed him everything. Gerald watched the footage twice. He asked me several careful questions. Then he leaned back in his chair and he said, "Margaret, I think we need to talk about what this might mean." What it might mean, Gerald explained, was this. Kayla had, on at least one occasion, and possibly more, photographed confidential estate documents. The question was why, and who she was sending the photographs to. Gerald had a contact at a firm that handled forensic financial investigation. He made a call while I sat in his office. Within the week, with the footage as a foundation, we had a clearer picture. Kayla's mother, a woman named Diane who lived in Nashville and whom I had met exactly twice at family gatherings, had a brother who was an attorney. Not the kind of attorney who helps people, the other kind. He specialized in contesting wills and estate claims. He had, in the past 4 months, been quietly building a case to challenge Ray's will on the grounds that Ray had shown signs of cognitive decline before his death and may not have been competent when he signed the document 3 years prior. This was not true. Ray had been sharp and clear-minded and meticulous until the end. Gerald had been with him when he signed that will, and there had been nothing to suggest anything other than a man who knew exactly what he was doing and why. But Kayla's uncle didn't need it to be true to file a challenge. He needed documents, inconsistencies, anything that could introduce doubt. And Kayla had been inside our family for 3 years, sleeping in our guest rooms and eating at our tables, and she had been gathering exactly that. I drove home from Gerald's office and I sat in the parking lot of a Kroger for 20 minutes because I didn't trust myself to drive. My son had no idea. I was certain of that. Whatever Kayla had told him, or not told him, about her family's intentions, Daniel did not know his wife had been photographing his father's estate documents and sending them to a lawyer building a case against his mother. I was certain of this because I know my son, and because when I thought about his face, his honest, tired, good face, I could not believe he knew. I called Patricia. "You have to tell him," she said, before I'd finished the sentence. "I know," I said. "Tonight?" she said. "I know," I said. I made dinner that night, pot roast, which Daniel has loved since he was 7. I set the table properly with the cloth napkins, and I put Sophie in her high chair, and I watched my granddaughter eat green beans one at a time with tremendous concentration while I waited for the right moment to take my family apart. After dinner, after Sophie was in bed, I asked Kayla if I could speak to Daniel alone for a few minutes. She looked at me then, really looked at me, and something moved across her face that I still can't fully name. It wasn't guilt exactly. It was more like a calculation, fast and flat. The way you look at a problem and decide in an instant whether to run from it or face it. "Of course," she said, and went upstairs. I showed Daniel everything. The footage, Gerald's findings, the documentation from the financial investigator. I showed him the photographs Kayla had taken on my phone, and I watched his face while he looked at them. He was quiet for a long time. Then he said, "How long have you known?" 2 weeks, I said. I needed to be sure. He looked at the wall. She said her uncle was just asking questions after Dad died. She said he was trying to help, that he thought maybe you'd been taken advantage of by Gerald's firm, that it was just him looking out for us. "Daniel," I said. "I know," he said. "I know." He went upstairs. I sat at the kitchen table and listened to their voices through the ceiling. Not the words, just the shape of the conversation, the rise and fall of it, and once a silence that lasted so long I held my breath. I will not tell you what was said between them. That belongs to my son. What I can tell you is that Kayla's uncle's case was never filed. Gerald sent a very clear letter. The cameras are gone now. I moved back to my own house in January, to my yellow kitchen and my rose bushes and my side of the bed. Daniel calls me every Sunday. He called me last Sunday and we talked for 45 minutes about nothing important, about Sophie pulling herself up on the coffee table, about the gutters I needed to have cleaned, about a documentary he thought I would like. He said Kayla wanted to know if I would come for Easter. I said I would think about it. Trust, I have learned, is not a door you open once. It is a door you open again and again, each time knowing more than you did before. The knowing doesn't make it easier. It just makes it more deliberate. Sophie is 14 months old now. She is walking, unsteadily and with tremendous confidence, the way children walk before they've learned to be afraid of falling. I watched her on a video Daniel sent last week, crossing the living room in that determined wobble, arms out for balance, laughing at nothing. She has Ray's nose and Daniel's ears, and when she laughs, she looks like nobody but herself. That's enough. That will always be enough.